All right, welcome to Therapized podcast. This is your host, Guy Hernandez, LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist here in California. And we're back. It's been 3 months. It's been a crazy time for a lot of people, and I've been making my own adjustments as well. But I'm glad to be back on the podcast and to put out some more content and continue to raise awareness and destigmatize mental health. Still looking for guests, and today we have another guest. I think at this point, I'm really want to emphasize having guests on the podcast, having more to talk about, and getting more perspectives on mental health options, on treatment, on issues that other therapists and mental health professionals are seeing in society. So I know a few people have reached out to me before, and I've reached out to others, but yeah, love to have people on the guest. And now that I am figuring out this whole Zoom telehealth thing, I've gotten a little more comfortable doing it. So I'm also making the podcast into a video. So if you haven't, there's one video available from our last episode 3 months. So yeah, you can find that on YouTube, Therapized podcast. And today we have, like I said, we have another guest. We have Natalie Silva on today. Natalie is an old friend. We went to grad school together, so it was really good to reconnect. And at the beginning of this episode, there's actually some kind of uncut stuff that I just left in where we didn't officially start. And the context behind that is I started recording the audio, forgot to record the video. But anyways, in the midst of that, my dog started barking incessantly and kind of disrupted the whole process. Anyways, so we restarted, and I left a little bit of a conversation we had before we officially restarted, just because I thought it was nice. So anyways, yeah, on today's episode, we are joined by Natalie Silva, LMFT. Natalie has experience working with youth and families, but currently specializes in women's mental health in her private practice. Natalie is also a trained perinatal mental health therapist and works with new and expecting mothers. Listen as we discuss issues unique to women's health, like self-esteem, body image, perfectionism, and how to transform your inner critic into a voice of self-compassion. You can find Natalie on Instagram and Facebook at Natalie Silva LMFT. Visit her website at nataliesilvalmft.com. And yeah, today it's a kind of a lax conversation. We're just kind of catching up, but mostly talking about women's mental health and my perspective of past work I've done, but also really gaining some insights to what she does. I could easily have Natalie back and we talk more specifically about one topic, and I'd love to hear if people want to know more specifically. So please reach out to Instagram or Facebook at Therapized_podcast. One idea we had was having a whole episode strictly about postpartum depression, since I have experience working with postpartum depression, albeit minimal, and it's a big focus of her work is women issues. So anyways, without further ado, please enjoy the episode. Make sure to check out Charmer and Klay for the great music. And thank you to the theme song, as always, to Brett Chance for Someone Up There Likes You. Of course, there it is. I see it. I think what COVID has helped with too is to let go of being perfect and on.
So good.
Right?
Yes. I think my clients feel closer to me in the sense that I'm not just this, like, especially kids, they don't think you exist outside of their bubble. But then when they hear, my dog in the background or my kid or whatever, or I say like, hey, I can only meet at 2:00 because that's when my kid naps. There is like a connection that happens because they're like, oh, you're a human? Sure. You have a family? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, part of, so second time around, Natalie.
Let's do this.
Natalie, thank you for being on Therapized podcast. For the listeners and the viewers, I have the dog on my lap because he was barking for about 5 minutes during the audio, and now he's here. And I also wasn't recording the video. So thanks again, Natalie. Sorry for the redundancy.
No, you're good. We are here. Let's do this.
All right. Yeah. Tell the people once again a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my name's Natalie Silva. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work predominantly out in the Central Valley. I work for a nonprofit part-time with school-age kids in the Medi-Cal system of care. And then recently, it was in April, I opened up my private practice part-time that specializes in women's mental health and perinatal mental health, which means I work with moms who are expecting or are postpartum.
Perfect. Yeah, and my question 10 minutes ago, before the dog interrupted, was really like, what inspired you to jump in and focus on women's mental health specifically?
Yeah. Yeah, so I really like that question because I spent a lot of intentional time thinking like who could I see myself working with for a very long time and who do I feel naturally connected to? Like who do I think I would be a best fit for? And I've always felt very connected to women and my own womanhood. So anything that was in alignment with women's rights, feminism, all of that stuff, I just felt really empowered by it. And watching women in my own social circle and professional circles, you know, struggling with things like body image and anxiety and, you know, depression, perfectionism, codependency, all of those things. Like I just felt really called to help where I could. I knew I had a certain skill set that could be useful.
Absolutely. And one of the things
Yeah.
we talked about was that if we don't bring it up, right, that we can just kind of accept it as the way it is, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's not functional. And I think when we start focusing more specifically and diving into different issues, it allows that person to struggle wherever they are, right?
Yes, and know that there's like help and support out there too. I think especially with the perinatal population. I mean, I knew when I was a mom, I think the closest I got to a screening was like, "Do you want to hurt yourself?"
Wow.
Yeah, and that was it. Like it happened, I think, at like my 6 weeks checkup to having the baby, and then 6 weeks after, and that was it. You know, there was not really anything else for me and feeling very invisible as a mom. I went through a very traumatic delivery with my daughter and recovery and just feeling very alone. And I don't want any mom to, you know, feel that way. So here I
Absolutely.
am.
And there's one of those things, right, with the perinatal, and I think even so perinatal, I looked it up, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Definition I found was 22 weeks into pregnancy
Hmm.
and 1 week, all the way to 1 week after delivery. Is that
Yes. So perinatal does encompass that. And then we also have this postpartum, which can be up to a year
right?
after having a baby. But you'll see postpartum anxiety and depression far after that. Like I still struggle with certain aspects of my trauma, you
Right.
know. So you probably wouldn't call it like postpartum depression or PTSD. And there's so many layers to just even the things that moms are at risk for. We just really talk about the depression part, but there's many disorders that are associated and risks for new moms.
And I think, well, actually, let me back up. Um, I last year I worked with one new mom. I think when I saw her when she had like a 1 month old baby and she was
Mm.
in the session, postpartum, right? And here I am,
Yeah.
the guy that is the specialist with teenage boys,
Hmm.
getting them off electronics and back to school. And
Yes.
here sits this new mom, and I'm like, what the hell am I gonna do? Um, but no, I was glad for the experience because what I learned from her was the the tragedy of it, and what you
Mm.
spoke that is the lack of resources, maybe not available, but that are integrated in your experience automatically.
Oh, yeah, there are none. I think it was just in 2019 where they passed legislation where hospitals have to not only screen, but offer resources.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like, wow,
because you're
we've been
talking
having babies for a long time. This shouldn't have taken so long.
seriously, because that's a big undertaking. And then maybe really think about and being able to sit with her and kind of hear her story and her experience. Um, and I was feeling really incompetent, like what can I provide this woman?
Yeah.
But what I really come to learn is uh, there's so much more to it than just giving birth and then you have a child.
Hmm.
There's
the postpartum that, and that's why she was coming to me, is postpartum depression and anxiety, uh,
Yes.
and uh, just the struggling of how do I get back to my career, right? Do I kind of reconnect with my spouse,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was all this stuff.
Oh, there's so much grief in motherhood, even if
Right.
you've never experienced like a loss of a baby or a miscarriage or anything like that. Even when you make it through and you have your baby and they're healthy, there is a loss that we don't talk about, an invisible loss of what our lives were like before, and in the cases where that baby is super sought after and wanted, and even then, even when it's what we want and we still want, there is this side of mourning of, wow, sometimes I really do miss going to the bathroom and not having an audience, or being woken up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. and having to get up and go to work. Those were all the things that nobody, y'all get, like, just when you get married, they're like, oh, marriage is hard. The same thing about parenthood. Parenthood's hard. You better get ready. Which sounds kind of like dismissive and callous. And then when you're actually in it, you're just sitting there like, well, wow, no shit. Those people aren't here with me at 3 a.m. when I'm like crying over my kid.
No, absolutely. And the lack
Yeah.
of sleep and what that does to our mental health, right?
Yes.
And that point that you just said there too, and what I kind of remember from working with that mom, since then, like talking to friends that that have kids, and
Yeah.
oh my God, like I always have someone attached to me. When do I just
Mm-hmm.
be the solo human? And that makes me think of that grief, right? Like there's a little bit of individuality lost, I imagine.
Oh yeah, and the physical like tapping out that happens. I breastfed my daughter for a very long time. She was past the age of 2, and I do remember feeling like, wow, I haven't had somebody like literally be like a part of me, nourishing them with my body for over 2 years. And
Right.
I loved our breastfeeding journey. It was beautiful on by so many levels, but there's always these two parts, right? As much as I loved it, there were definitely days where it was like,
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could,
Yeah.
I can't imagine, but I can imagine.
Yeah, when you speak it, it's just like we were talking about. When you speak it, there's this moment of, oh, wow, like, of course that's your experience. Once somebody says it out loud, it makes a lot of sense, but it's not something that really gets talked about.
Yeah. And what I know, and going to that, and the my mission in the podcast, what we were talking about earlier, is to
Yeah.
consistently destigmatize mental health. Like
Mm-hmm.
we know with physical health, right? We've been on all these different things, and
Yeah.
we can have all these selling points and ads. And I think we're seeing a bigger movement lately with mental health, and I'm hearing ads for um, BetterHelp or these other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're getting there, but I still don't see it as integrated into our society as like a, a social norm. Or
Yeah, like just going to the doctor for your annual
right,
physical or
yeah, like I'm going to therapist today, but there's still
exactly.
but what I reflecting on working with that mom, I remember working against the stigma as well, right? Like
Yeah. I should be able to handle this.
that's exactly what it was. I shouldn't be here. All these other
This
moms
shouldn't be this
can
hard.
do
This
it,
isn't who I am.
right? And you know, thinking that all these other moms can do it, they're not going crazy, right? Or whatever the negative narrative was. And, over time, I've only worked with, so that was my only client that was in that kind of, that we worked on that theme, a new mother.
Mm-hmm.
But I would imagine if you work with that consistently, you'd feel like, you have no idea how many mothers are saying the same.
I feel that way about so many of my clients. I'm like, if I could just get you guys all in a room, everything
Right.
would be good. Like you could talk to you and you and you. And I think that's why. But gosh, guy, talk about destigmatizing mental health.
Right.
That's like individual. That's one-on-one. There's a very safe space about that. Then we got to move to destigmatizing like group support. Once I suggest group, it's most of the time it's like, oh no,
Yeah.
no, I'm not. But oh God, groups can be, especially for new moms,
For sure.
because there is this collectivism of like, wow, I'm not alone. And I think it's really important to bring into this part right here that social media is a major influence of why new moms feel that way.
Right.
We talk jokingly about the Insta moms that are, you know, killing it, making banana bread and homeschooling their kids and running, you know, by whatever, like businesses and CEOs. And it is a 15-second clip of somebody's life edited in a very, you know, strategic way to make it look a certain way. So when you're just like a regular Instagram mom, you know, you can feel very less than. And I think it's important to like kind of dismantle that.
For sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, uh, going to the groups, to touch on that really quickly, I remember, you know, her and I, we did some good work together, because at the end of the day, you know, my goal is to, regardless of who's sitting there, and this is what, to me, what the unique thing can be about, you know, seeking therapy, is that I sat there and I let her be her unapologetically,
Mm-hmm.
with no judgment and
Yeah.
with no course correction, right?
Yes.
I'm just like, whatever you're experiencing, and you know, with some psychoeducation and about kind of unhelpful automatic kind of cognition,
Yeah.
negative. I just said, hey, like, we kind of got to the point of her accepting that all of those thoughts that were flooding her mind were not indicative of who she was.
Yeah.
And you know, part of that is her body is just like, in her mind is just trying to figure out what the hell's going on, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, 4 weeks postpartum,
It was,
if
yeah,
that mom is listening, you are amazing for seeking support that quickly after having a baby, because many people don't. And I think that that person should feel so proud of themselves, because a lot of what happens is women will have these experiences that are less than ideal, especially if it's like a first baby or the first time experiencing this. And it really can, if gone untreated, color their choices to have babies in the future or expand their families if they wanted to. So I think the sooner that moms can get care, and it sucks because the first person you're going to go to is your primary care physician. And I hope it's shifting now, but the experience in the past has been like, oh, these are baby blues, you
right.
know, and it can be really dismissive. If anybody's listening and a mom comes to you and says, you know, I don't feel like myself, that's like the number one red flag. If a mom is saying she doesn't feel like herself, then something is wrong and she needs to get some actual
Right.
support.
No, I think that's a good point. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wish that the group was kind of not, I think I wish it would just be, I don't know if it is automatically kind of like, hey, you're enrolled for this, you can show up or not, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was,
Kind of like, you know, the hospital tour or your, you know, whatever. They teach you like CPR and stuff like that.
right. But I do remember one of the big things for this mom of the turning point was what you said was the power of the group. Because I was with her, it's like, I can get you probably to a certain place of not judging yourself. But I was like, I think it would be powerful for you to hear another mom say the similar thing as you, so that you really have that proof and you feel that connection, that I'm not alone in this. Because she's like, what
That's
is this dude going
beautiful.
to say at the end of the day? I'm
I
like,
love it. But that's beautiful. Like she probably had to flex that muscle within herself before she would be ready for group. And I think if you look at it even in a more expanded, like I'm still friends with one of the moms I met on my hospital tour. And it was life-saving to be able to go to her and be like, is your kid doing this? Because my kid's doing this, you know, and we need that. We're either going to go to our friends or we're going to go to Google, and I'd rather go to my friends.
right.
You know, yeah. So that bond that we get and that connection that gets made in group, it goes far beyond whatever 4-week, 8-week, you know, sessions you're going to have with those people. Those relationships are formed and will hopefully be lifelong, because that is very nice to know that you're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not, you know, one of my big, um, one thing I'm big on, I think, is that we're not supposed to do this alone. Not any of it, right? Not
No,
parenting,
if we could, we would be out of jobs, Guy.
that's true. That is
We
true.
can't do this alone. We need people.
Well, so
We need people.
now what I'm curious about is jumping to the perinatal then. So
Yeah.
I gave a brief kind of synopsis of what I working with postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, what are you seeing then with women in that perinatal period? What are they
Yeah.
coming to you with? What are the, I don't know, what are the key issues that I think important to say and for someone to hear?
So I think I'm going to speak for any moms that are expecting right now during the coronavirus pandemic, because what I'm seeing and hearing is a lot of fear and a lot of grief, and it goes hand in hand, right? Because when you were first pregnant or trying to conceive this baby, this was not happening. So there was no prepping for, okay, when I deliver this baby, this will happen. And these are life moments and life experiences that we won't get back, right? So there's a lot of loss in that.
Oh yeah.
And partners are not allowed right now to be, at least in my county, to be at doctor's appointments with their partners.
Whoa.
So
Okay.
these new moms are going and hearing their baby's heartbeat for the first time without their partners next to them, and there's a lot of sadness around that. You know, I mean, think of a partner who has struggled with infertility or has had losses and needs that social emotional support from their partner, and that's not allowed right now.
Right.
So there is a lot of like things we can't control, and giving space to, you know, letting those emotions come. So I would say there's a lot of grief with my perinatal, you know, clients, or just even people socially that I know are expecting babies. It's what I'm seeing right now. It's just a lot of grief.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah.
Jumping really quickly to for me, and I've heard this before. I haven't experienced it myself because I don't have children, but
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that when you have birth, right, or when you have birth, when you
I
have,
love it.
have
Yes.
when you give birth, and you become a parent for the first time. So just
Mm-hmm.
specifically about becoming a parent for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and then fast forward raising your child of it bringing you back to your childhood or bringing you back to your relationship with your mother.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
I'm curious if that comes up in your work. Is that something you address? You know, what themes?
Absolutely. Um, Absolutely. And I think we talked about it a little bit before, about the reparenting part that I
Yeah.
also try to do in a lot of my work. So the inner child work, identifying, you know, these wounds that we carry inside of ourselves from our own childhood, absolutely come out when we become parents. And I think it can be, you're like at a crossroad, you know, it's that intergenerational trauma that gets kind of passed down. So self-compassion is going to be the number one thing that we focus on when you're saying the thing that your mom used to say to you that you told yourself before having children. You would never say that to your child, and that statement comes out of your mouth. That's okay. You're still a good mom. I can't tell you how many times I say that in practice with moms. You are a good mom, and your baby is going to be okay, because that, I think, is the greatest fear, especially if you're talking about new parents who are coming from less than functioning families.
Mm-hmm.
There's this really overwhelming fear that we're going to mess our children up. I think even if when you come from a functioning family, it's just the number one fear. You're going to mess your kid up, and you're going to be the reason why. And I think acknowledging that, but going deeper, usually it's linked to a lot of being raised by a really critical parent, you know, so that being your first experience with how you see yourself is that you're just not good. So of course that's going to spill over into how you parent. I think a lot of what I see too is the need to control things. So oftentimes having a really hard time letting your partner come in and help and support you because you don't feel like it's either good enough or that it's not going to be the right way. And that's probably more with my anxious clients and my anxious moms. It's just sort of how their brains are soothing themselves right now. I got to be in control, and I got to be the one to feed the baby, and I got to be the one to put that baby to bed because it has to be done right. But that's just not sustainable in the long term. We need to receive support, but there's a lot of guilt with that too, because we go back to that. I shouldn't need this. I should be able to do this I'm not even working right now.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And all the good ones.
Yeah.
And it's unrealistic, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And because although I haven't worked with too much with like the perinatal bubble or not at all, or new moms, other than that one example, I work a ton with moms and their teenagers, teenage boys, and kind of getting them off of electronics or completing chores, or just kind of working through that teenage angst, and then maybe defiance. And
Yeah.
a lot of it is we come to the anxiety about, and the need to control. And one of the things I'm always kind of shifting towards is, if you be regulated, mom. If you're regulated, this will go a lot better.
Yes, yes. We have to be our children's baseline. They got to come down to us,
Absolutely.
not us meeting them.
But to your point, and getting to that place of me selling that to that parent is by trying to have them kill that critic inside and say, hey, it's all good. You're not a bad parent. And
Yeah.
saying, hey, if I could bring, like you were saying earlier, if I can bring you and every mom I've worked with in the same room that had a teenager that wasn't doing well, you guys would all probably just take a big exhale and go, what do we do? What are we pretending for? What are we all pretending for? Because I'm sitting here trying to stressing myself to be a certain way with the shoulds. I should be doing better because you think that mom next door is doing better. And what you realize,
Yes.
I just came from her house and she's saying the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think too, like, that mom who speaks that way about herself would never say that to the woman next to her.
Right.
But
Right.
it's how we speak to ourselves all the time. She would probably tell that mom, oh my God, I see you. You're doing such a good job. Like, I know parenting a teenager is hard, but we don't speak to ourselves that way.
Right.
And we're with ourselves all the time. We are with ourselves all the time. And I think, I think really good, solid work is done in changing the relationship that we have with ourselves, because we're always going to be here in this body, in this mind,
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think often and going to that idea of the critic, right? We this is a common phrase, right? We're our own worst critic, and if we don't get to challenge that person. Going back to what you said on the previous recording about driver's seat, and when the critic is in charge, we're kind of just anxious, reactive beings that aren't really, I think, finding composure and maybe like peace in our life. Where like that our team can be going through something and it doesn't mean anything about them specifically as a child or you specifically as a parent. It's just people go through shit.
Yes, because we're not raising like parts of ourselves. We're raising human beings with their own thoughts and their own emotions and their own like chemical makeup and constructs. Like, I think if any parent can come to that realization faster, that my child does not represent who I am as a person, we would have a lot more happy parents.
Yeah. Kind of, I think, understanding that, I think it's said so much, but I don't think it's believed or felt. The nobody's perfect thing, or we all make mistakes. We say those things, I think, generically, but I think, and I fully buy into them, right? But in practice, when I work with parents so much, I know it's not felt, we can say, and they're like, yeah, but you don't feel that, right?
That's like wishful thinking. Like, oh yeah, sure, maybe you go do that, but I'm just gonna keep, putting the pressure on over here. And when you work with parents, they often come in with a kid who has behavioral stuff going on, and they want you to fix that kid, when really, in reality, it's that relationship that needs to be mended a little bit. And that starts with the parent being able to look at their own stuff and what they're bringing to that relationship. Absolutely. Which I think is a hard shift to make,
For sure.
Because, we got to be vulnerable.
And, with that point, and I want to jump back to what you were saying.
I love that.
The audio, my dog is going wild on my lap. But what you were saying earlier, because I want to recapture it for this version, is talked about that question you asked people when you're trying to help them heal from past wounds. Maybe childhood wounds, and maybe those wounds are awakened more often when they become a parent, right? Because now they have this maybe little mirror into their past lives. But anyways, what was that question that you asked?
So anytime, and you could not be a parent or be a parent, but anytime I have a client come to me and say, hey, I want to work on experiencing this or doing this less, whether that's irritability, arguing with my partner, overeating, overspending, whatever it is. I really ask them to kind of like divert their eyes or close their eyes. And we do a really intentional body scan, which essentially just means you are connecting with yourself and your physical being, and you're looking for places that you're just aware of, whether it's because of tension, or a certain emotion is evoked, and you're giving some space for that. And then I dive a little bit further into, okay, tell me kind of when the last time you felt that way was. And one of the questions that I like to ask when they can identify a feeling that's coming up for them is, how old do you feel you are when you're feeling that way? And I think it's a question that doesn't get asked. And it's not a question that I've really ever heard be asked a lot in therapy. So when it's asked, people are kind of like, wait, what? What do you mean? You know? But if they can make that connection, you can see this kind of light bulb go off for them. And you can see it's like, yeah, when I feel criticized by my partner and I start yelling at them and I feel really out of control, I feel like I'm 13, you know? And then we go into, all right, tell me a little bit more about what it was like when you were 13. And it just sort of helps them remember and make these connections, which can be really powerful.
No, absolutely. And to that point, in for me, the importance of the body scan, or be in touch with our bodies, that can drive what we do, right? We feel hungry. That's an automatic response that drives us then to eat. We feel thirsty, right? Automatic response. Now there's all these other more complex, nuanced ones that we may feel them, and before we even consciously are aware of the physical sensation, we are then doing the action without even and I think this is where we can get stuck in these disruptive patterns in our life.
Yes. Yeah. Because you don't know any better at that point. You haven't. And I think that's where the self-compassion is huge to establish in the very beginning, because we're not trying to judge ourselves into change. Those are tools that your brain has used to get you through really hard things in your past.
Right.
But you're coming here to this space because you've decided that this doesn't work for me anymore. And now I want to pick up some new tools. So it's really not like, oh God, you wasted your time. And yeah, I was such an idiot, you know? It's really just like, wow, I'm thankful that my brain got me through that. I'm just going to try something different now.
You know what it reminds me of when we're speaking of like Instagram, we were talking about earlier, is our brain makes these algorithms based off what we do and what we experience. Just like, right, if you start getting ads for something because you made one click, and then maybe in a year, like, I don't like that store anymore.
Yeah.
My algorithm of what I've clicked and what I experienced still thinks I need it, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, you've spent your, X amount of years of your life with this, operating thought system. It's going to take a little while for you to change it. And I think that's why in the very beginning of sessions two, I make it really clear, like, there's really no finish line here.
Right.
And you can, especially for my problem solving, doing, thinking clients, you can tell there's like an irritation there of like, huh? What are you talking about? But then there's a sense of freedom of like, oh, because it takes the pressure off. We're not running a marathon here. This is your life.
Yeah.
This is your life.
Yeah. I love that point. There was with my more anxiety related clients, or like something on the, I would say, the spectrum of anxiety, whether it be OCD like, or panic, or generalized, or social, whatever. They want the anxiety to go away, right? They want it just to be done. And they, like you're saying, they want the tools. Tell me what I can do, right? And I say, you know what you can do? Let go. If you want the tool, let it happen.
They're like, what?
Yeah, be anxious.
Yeah.
And then I need, there's a critic in my head. I'd like to post more on Instagram and get more content out there. I would like to. I don't have to, but I would like to. Practicing. But I had posted something maybe months ago. Feel the feeling, or fear the feeling and it'll grow. Feel the feeling and it'll slow.
Yes, I think I remember seeing that.
Yeah, and because I love using quotes in my work because it's easy to remember, right? Like if I can remember a phrase, then I could come back to that. And because I was working with a few clients where they just wanted to control the anxiety. I'm like, you're not going to control it. It's like, would say all these different analogies, and it kind of just got them to the point of, you know what, I want you to visualize yourself putting your hand in a river, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I feel from you when you're trying to control it, you're trying to grab that water and move it and manipulate
Yeah.
it into a bucket, but you're by the time you get to the bucket, your hand's empty and you're frustrated and,
Yeah.
oh, can I do this? Feel it. Sometimes it'll be
Mm-hmm.
cold, sometimes it'll be warm, sometimes
Yeah.
it's fast, sometimes it's moving slow, but you can't control it. And I was kind of using the river analogy as like the internal anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just let it flow. And with my more panic related clients, then it was just like, the panic's gonna happen. Let it run. Just
Mm-hmm.
find more security in it, in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Get familiar with that. I tell all my clients, we're going to get real familiar with that part of you. And I think if clients know right up, like off the bat, your style, because that's not everybody's style, right? But it sounds like we're pretty in alignment with like, this is how we treat these things going on, because that's very similar. Mine's feel, deal, heal. I got that from Tiffany Rose. She's a really popular therapist on Instagram, and I loved it because it was like, yeah, we don't have to like do anything, and that dealing can just literally be like feeling it and being present with your body, and that's important. And I think if we can like be upfront with clients of like, I'm not here to have this miraculous solution to your life, but I'm with you while we figure out how to get you to a place that feels healthier for you. Because that panic, especially those panic OCD perfectionistic, like that's what drives them. That's what soothes that anxiety for them. And if we can model for them a pace that's a little slower, but secure, like unwavering, right? It's not going to go anywhere. That anxiety, that anxious person that you've been for the last, 30 something years, probably still going to be there in the next 30, but it doesn't have to be in control of your life.
Exactly. And I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
And going back to the reparenting, right? And that question you asked, so what age is that? And moving through the feelings that drive us and maybe integrating some of those past memories of how we got to the point we are today.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the powerful kind of transformations you've seen in working kind of with either with the perinatal population or like specifically within women's mental health? What are those transformations you see into like reparenting and now I'm this adult?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. So I think what happens when we come to a place of letting go, like literally that's what this process is. The goal of reparenting is not to villainize the parent that caused your pain. It's to come to a place like human to human where you recognize your parent parented you the best that they could given the tools that they had at the time.
Right.
Because that can also bring up a lot of like, well, now I'm mad at my dad or my mom and I don't want to spend time with them. And that's okay too. No judgment on that. But we're not trying to come up with like excuses for, or scapegoats or whatever. We're trying to move forward. Mm-hmm. And so I think the biggest thing that happens in that transformation is when we have this thinking mindset, this doing mindset of, I got to get this to get out of here. I got to get it to go away. There's this like chaotic panic that happens, right? And there's this need to control. And I kind of envision like someone just squashing something down so tiny that they can just kind of toss it away. But what happens when we squash something, it becomes really concentrated and oftentimes way more powerful if we were to just give some space within ourselves. So I try to like get my clients from being this like super dense ball of emotions to this like beautiful little bubble that's kind of floating around whatever, sea that they're in, because they're so connected with themselves. It doesn't really matter what's happening outside of them in the storm of life, right? We're so okay. And I forgot to make this connection too with the reparenting. The biggest mission of all of that work is to rebuild that person's trust within themselves. I believe that depression and anxiety are all rooted in this disconnect that we have with ourselves. At some point, we didn't get the opportunity to believe that we could do certain things.
Absolutely.
And so when we can reparent ourselves every little tiny time we do that, I believe that trust is restored even stronger, which creates this resiliency. Then it really doesn't matter whatever you're going through because you're so at home with yourself that it's going to be okay. Even if it's scary, if it's hard, if it's difficult, if it's the worst thing that you ever have gone through, you know you're going to be okay because you're so okay and connected to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. That's what it makes me think of, as because I had these conversations about confidence, and with the adult males I work with, right? Of like, what is this? I mean, I think similar to the work you're doing with women's and stuff, like, what is my identity, you know, and like, what are the
Yeah.
constructs that I'm measuring myself against that is leading to more anxiety or depression of who I am
Mm-hmm.
and how I identify as a man in society.
Yeah.
When we talked about the idea of confidence, it was basically similar to that definition. There is, you may see someone give this kind of generic Hollywood movie idea of confidence, but I said, well, let's try to redefine it, because that's not really realistic. That maybe that person could act that way, but internally they feel
Oh,
incredibly
like
insecure.
imposter syndrome. And yeah.
Right. And I kind of came to the point that, you know, to me, and I said this, you don't have to buy this, you know, to my client, you don't have to buy this, but to me, confidence is the person that, whether the situation is going well or not, it's scary or not, to your point, they trust in themselves that they'll be okay, and that that none of that external stuff defines them, right? If they're struggling, this means they're struggling.
Yeah. Oh, and
You know?
just imagine if we could all get there. Like, if we could all get to a place where we're so okay with ourselves that we're not trying to convince anybody else around us that we're okay, or we're not trying to make, you know, the person next to us okay so we can be okay. I just think that there would be probably a lot more like genuine relationships and happier, you know, marriages and happier kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we were saying earlier, can we stop pretending, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like there's a shift. There's this. I feel like there's a, like, if I think of it as 360, there's a couple degrees we've moved.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's because I live in my own bubble, right? I'm in the Bay Area-ish still,
Mm-hmm.
but mental health's pretty big in the Bay Area, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe you know, I'm kind of in that bubble. I get it,
Yeah.
but I think why some of my reasons why I think we're making that shift to being a little bit more genuine and stop pretending as a kind of a society is from listening to the podcast and hearing people talk about their mental health struggles, and not even on mental health podcasts. Like, I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts. They all talk about seeing therapists. Where
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, when I was watching comedians, they would talk negatively about, you know, I'm not seeing no therapist right now.
Yes.
But also with what you're doing, and I'm seeing this a lot, is all of the content that's out there that is about mental health in so many different layers, and it seems like it is becoming a more mainstream conversation. See, and even to your point, right, of the Insta mom, and I'll wrap this up shortly with my soapbox moment.
I love it.
I'm also seeing the other end, right, where moms or just people in general are posting like, this is what motherhood is like most of
Yes.
the time.
Like literally them crying in their pantry.
Yeah, yeah. Or
Yeah.
like the mom's trying to go to the bathroom and you can see like the eyes under the door.
Oh yeah. Or like she's eating her kids' chocolate after they've gone to bed. I've done that a few times. You know, yeah, there's a realism about that for sure.
Yeah, so I think I'm seeing more of that as well. It's kind of opening people to stop pretending, be a little bit more authentic.
I actually am seeing that shift with like the body positivity movement too. You're seeing a lot more people, even side by side, you know, showing the Instagram poses versus like the real life, you know, and it's the same body taken, you know, 30 seconds apart from each other. And I think that was one of the struggles that I actually had. Let's talk about our inner critic here, guys. So when I first opened the practice Instagram, I really felt at a crossroads with myself of like, who do I put on here? Okay. And if you know me in real life, I'm very transparent, keep it real. You know, I like to cuss and I use sarcasm a lot. But it was this like moment in time of, oh, is that okay? Are people going to want to work with me professionally if they, you know that whatever, that I drop the F-bomb occasionally, or You know, so it really, and it wasn't even like other clients could see me. It was even like colleagues. My colleagues are going to see this, and are they going to think differently of me? But I really chose, because I've done that work myself. I went, you know, into my heart, and I was like, no, I want to show up as me, and I am so much more than just a therapist. I'm a mom, and, you know, all of these other roles that I have in my life. And I wanted it to be a space where if I didn't feel comfortable sharing that, then probably nobody else is going to feel that comfort too. And so it was a very intentional move of, I wanted this to be psychoeducational and helpful, but I really wanted it to be a space of connection and community for women.
I love that. And to that point, can you tell people a little briefly about what you're actually specifically referring to? Because I know what you're referring to, but maybe the listeners don't.
What action? What are you talking about?
Like the coffee chit chat. And
Oh, yeah. So
what are you doing there on Instagram?
yes. So I have the practice has an Instagram page, and every Friday we do a coffee chit chat with Nat, and it's essentially just exactly what it is. I get on, you know, the chat every Friday, and we talk about things related to motherhood. We've talked about topics like toxic friendships and how to remove yourself from them, how to have boundaries in marriage. That was one of our episodes that was pretty popular and got a lot of good feedback. So that's kind of the community that we have going on there. And we get quite a bit of engagement in the feed below those videos, which is really awesome.
That is awesome. No,
Yeah.
I love watching some of the clips of the coffee chit. Is it coffee chit chat? Is that what it is with Nat?
It's coffee chit chat with Nat. Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And I definitely sense that community connection. I could see that there's definitely a lot of involvement and engagement as far as me to put out more content out there.
I love it. I've heard that a lot too, which honestly makes me so happy, because I'm such a community over competition person. Like, I want everybody to just get out there and put out your stuff if that's what you feel called to, because I think the more that we do that, the more we inspire like other people to go and do what they want to do.
For sure. And you know, when you said that point about like, who do I put out there, right? And I can think of how long it took me to get the podcast, just to emotionally get to the point.
Yes.
You're putting yourself out there to be criticized.
You are.
And I remember kind of hearing of like, oh, you know, people that know me personally are like, oh, you know, you're kind of either faking or fraud, you know, being a fraud on there. Talk about it's like, well,
who are you to be talking about any of this stuff? Yeah.
Right. And I said, no, like, I'm not, you know, my goal isn't to sit here and pretend I don't have a life where I've made my own mistakes or have had my own journey. The reason actually I'm here is because my journey in mental health made me so passionate about it, because I had wished I gotten it sooner. I had wished I got it sooner. And if I can help anyone be inspired to reach out and get help, and before it's too late, or just before they have to keep suffering for too much longer.
I was going to say, like, when you're on the other side of it and you know that there is a different life that can be lived, you can't help yourself but want to spread that around.
Right. And I'm so relieved that I'm at this point now, but there was a time where, you know, and that's why, you know, and so I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing. I feel like there's so many good therapists out there, and I'd love to see them all like putting their stuff out there. And
I think we have to be honest, because I think a lot of the times our clients can think that, oh, you must, you know, never yell at your kids or never lose your shit, or you must have a perfect marriage, or and that's just simply not the truth at all. And I think we as therapists are afraid, because there's so many rules and regulations with our field. We're afraid to be ourselves in it, because we don't want to get, you know, in trouble or, you know, be unprofessional. But there's a way to do it. There's an art to do that and still hold so much space for your client.
For sure.
Know?
I think we're gonna come to a conclusion here. To conclude this, and I love this conversation. I feel like I could easily talk to you.
Absolutely.
You think of how much in grad school and
I
get
know, it's so
always
good to
easy
see
to talk to.
you.
I know. My goal is to eventually get everyone on here, but
That would be so awesome. I would really be happy about that.
so far you would be the third because I had two other grads.
Yeah, I did. I listened to that one. I loved hearing their voices too.
So yeah, no, I really appreciate it. But as my closing question to you is, what is it that you wish the younger version of yourself?
Oh, I got goosebumps. I got so much to say to her.
What is it that you wish she knew back then? Yeah.
I think if I could tell her anything, it would be that you're going to be okay. That you are good enough,
Mhm.
and that you're going to be okay. Yeah. I think that would have spared me a lot of unhealthy soul searching that happened.
I got you.
If I could have just been given more of those opportunities to really get to know myself, to build that trust within my own self earlier on in my life, I think that would have benefited me greatly as an adult.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, flipping that question then outwardly to clients, what is it that you wish a listener right now that is contemplating, let's say it's a young woman or a woman in her 20s or a woman in her 50s or whatever, what is it you'd like them to hear?
Okay. If I was speaking to somebody who's thinking about asking for help,
yeah, yeah.
I think I might tell them the same thing, like, you're going to be okay. And then I'd follow that up with, time is going to pass regardless.
I like
I
that.
say that a lot to clients who are struggling with, whether it's suicidal thoughts or like, time's going to pass regardless. So you can be here and you can be living the life that you want for yourself. And I can help you get through that. So I think I would emphasize like that you're not alone, and there is help there when you're ready to reach out for it, and you'll know when you're ready.
And you're not crazy.
Yes.
Anyone, right? That's what that makes me think of, right? Is that
there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah, the person that's on the edge is, what is the critic saying that's keeping you from getting help?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna be okay. It might be scary, it might be hard, you might be exhausted, but it's gonna be okay.
No, I love that. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for being on today, and thank you for being a good sport and sitting through the parking.
I love it.
Restarting.
I'm surprised he hasn't barked yet. He
looks way
he's looking passed out.
Yeah, he looks way too comfortable. Real quick, tell the people where to find you.
Yeah, so I am active on Instagram. You can find me at natalie.silva.lmft. That's also my handle over on Facebook. And then you can find me on my website at www.nataliesilvalmft.com.
Perfect. And we'll post that all in the show notes as well.
Yay.
Take care of yourself. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Guy. It was so good to see you.
Likewise.
Bye.
Bye.